So now I'm going to be talking about the economic impacts of the Black Plague and how that fed into the dissolvement of church authority, and then also the adoption of the Renaissance ideas that Petrarch had started. So to start, a quick primer on the economic situation in Europe before the Black Plague. Europe is very overpopulated, and as a result, most of the available land is being used to create crops that people can eat. The rigid class structure that we talked about earlier is still in place, with serfs kind of being locked into servitude and with basically having to rely on the clergy and lords and landowners in order to get work and basically survive. And because of this, there's a huge surplus of labor, right? So this surplus of labor, in economic terms, results in the serfs having little to no bargaining power. So modern, it'd be like someone who's so desperate for a job, they'll do anything for it, right? They're basically willing to sell their freedom just to put food on the table for their families. And yeah, I'm bringing in a supply and demand graph for this. I know it is not necessarily associated with the class, but I do think it's interesting and it displays my point well. So if we look at this supply and demand curve, right, this is demand curve going downwards, and this is supply. This is demand for labor, right? So right now we have the supply for labor being very high, with the demand staying the same right before the Black Plague hits, and this results in a very low wage for the serfs, which we can understand as them basically having no bargaining power and having no freedom to escape the situation they're in. But because of the Black Plague, labor is in short supply. You know, as terrible as all these people dying creates a necessity for laborers, and that shifts the demand curve to the left, which basically results in the serfs having bargaining power, right? They can demand a higher return on their wages because people need them so bad. And this, combined with the serfs acquiring land from the church that desperately needs money, boosts up their social status. And all of a sudden, they're not, living day by day. They have better food, more money, they have land themselves. They kind of go from serfs, which are pseudo-slaves, to a lower class, right? So this free lower class, seeing, the collapse of the physical authority of the church and the cultural/philosophical authority, rejects these old ideas. And with this newfound wealth, they actively seek to better their own lives now, right? So they start moving to the cities, they have their own property, and they start demanding kind of a slice on the table. They start really challenging the guilds, the lords, and the clergy. And this results, a great example of this is the Ciampi Revolt, which happens in 1378. So that's where the lower class of Florence literally takes over the city. Right? So we see the Black Plague from 1347 to 1351, and then all of a sudden in 1378, there's this, I wouldn't even call them peasants anymore, this lower class revolt that takes over the city. The revolt itself ended up in a failure, but it shows how the lower class and the people in Europe are actively challenging this old authority. And another side note that I think is really interesting is that because Europe was so overpopulated before, and I mentioned how every part of land needs to be focused on food production. Without all these new mouths to feed, right? Without this massive population, land can now be used for trade goods, livestock, cotton, stuff you grow on the ground, right? That people can sell. And this helps the rise of a new merchant class. So people like the Medicis, like bankers, traders, they all of a sudden can start getting wealth that wasn't really available before. And as we know, these new rich merchant class families are major patrons of the Renaissance. Their contributions to the artists and the philosophers who shaped the ideas and expanded on the ideas that Petrarch started. It's a major part of why the Renaissance, took off. They needed the financial support that the church originally wasn't willing to give them. So in conclusion, the Black Plague had religious, cultural, and economic repercussions that directly helped the Renaissance, right? The church's authority is physically hurt through their actions and their need of money due to the Black Plague, and then the Black Plague itself, the psychological impact, the philosophical impact of having your entire worldview shattered, and the church not being able to do anything about that, challenges that authority even further and helps people accept these new Renaissance ideas. And the economic impacts lets common people get themselves in a situation where they can better themselves and kind of live into these new Renaissance ideas of humanism, individuality, and then also challenge the authority even more so, besides just those points I made earlier. And then, of course, culminating in the patrons as well, being powerful enough to provide financial support for these ideas as well. That's it. I really enjoyed this class. And this was kind of long-winded, but I thought it was really interesting. I wanted to share it. Hey, so thank you for a great semester. Thank you, David, if you want to turn the camera around for me and my cameraman. No? Okay. Take care.